The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for nearly a mile, its ceiling lost in clouds of engineer mist that swirled with the colors of 12 different species. And at the center of it all stood Counselor Vethrak, his silver scales catching the light as he addressed the assembled representatives with barely contained frustration. 43 years, he declared, his voice echoing through the chamber. For 43 years, the humans of Earth have ignored our invitations, rejected our offers of trade, and refused to acknowledge the authority of this council. And I ask you all today, how much longer will we tolerate this insult? The representatives murmured among themselves, tentacles and claws and delicate appendages gesturing in agreement or concern. And the Valtorian ambassador shifted uncomfortably in her seat as she watched Vethrak work the crowd with practiced ease on Earth. In a quiet office building in Geneva, Daniel Carter stood at a window and watched the sun set over the mountains, his gray hair neat and his dark suit perfectly pressed. And he held a tablet displaying the latest transmission from the council with the calm expression of a man who had seen this moment coming. For a very long time, they want an answer by tomorrow, said Admiral Lisa Monroe from behind him, her voice steady but her eyes betraying her concern. Vethrak is pushing hard for sanctions, and the council seems ready to follow his lead. Daniel turned to face her, and despite the weight of the situation, he managed a small smile that did not quite reach his eyes. They have been pushing for 43 years, Lisa, and we have given them the same answer every time. This feels different, she replied. Crossing her arms, the Solarians have built a coalition, and Vethrak has convinced at least 8 of the 12 species that we are either too primitive to matter or too arrogant to reason with. Daniel set down the tablet and walked to his desk, where a photograph of his daughter and grandchildren sat in a simple frame, and he looked at their smiling faces for a long moment before speaking again. Do you remember what President Chen said when we first detected their signals? Lisa nodded slowly, her jaw tight with memory. She said that we had a choice. We could rush to join the galaxy and become just another species scrambling for power. Or we could take our time and become something better. And we chose to wait, Daniel said. We chose to build, to prepare, to become strong enough that we would never have to beg for a seat at anyone's table. And now Vethrak thinks our silence means weakness. Does it matter what he thinks? Lisa asked. If they send a fleet, then we will deal with it, Daniel interrupted gently. But not today, and not with anger, because the moment we respond with force is the moment we become exactly what they expect us to be, across the vast emptiness of space. Counselor Vethrak retired to his private chambers and called for his senior advisor, a younger Solarian named Kethver, who had spent 3 years studying humanity from a safe distance. Tell me again, Vethrak demanded. Tell me why we should not simply crush them and be done with it. Kethver hesitated, his scales flickering with nervous energy, and he pulled up a holographic display showing Earth and its surrounding space. The humans are strange, Counselor, and I do not say this lightly, because in all my years of study, I have never encountered a species quite like them. Strange how? Vethrak asked, settling into his chair with impatience. They fight among themselves constantly, yet they unite instantly against outside threats. And they are fragile individually, but terrifyingly resilient as a group. And they come from a world that by all logic should have killed them 1,000 times over. So they are survivors, Vethrak said dismissively. Many species survive harsh worlds. It is more than that, Kethver insisted. They have technology they do not use, weapons they do not deploy, and resources they do not exploit. And when I try to understand why, I find nothing but silence. Vethrak waved a clawed hand in dismissal. You see mystery where there is only primitiveness, and I see a species too foolish to recognize their own insignificance. And tomorrow we will teach them the price of ignoring the Galactic Council. The next day, Daniel Carter stood before a communication array and delivered Earth's response to the Council's ultimatum. His voice calm and clear and carrying the weight of 8 billion souls. The people of Earth thank the Galactic Council for their continued interest in our world. And we recognize the sincerity of your invitation, but we must respectfully decline. And we ask that you honor our wish to remain independent. He paused, and somewhere in the back of his mind, he heard the echoes of every leader who had spoken these words before him. Earth will not join the Council at this time, and we hope that this decision will be met with understanding and peace. The transmission ended, and in the great hall of the Galactic Council, Vethrak rose to his feet with fury burning in his ancient eyes. You see? He roared. You see how they mock us with their politeness and their refusals. And I say enough. I say we show them what happens to worlds that defy the will of the Council. The vote was swift and decisive, with 10 species supporting sanctions and 2 abstaining. And by the time the session ended, a fleet of 200 warships had been authorized to travel to Earth's solar system in Geneva. Admiral Monroe received the news and immediately activated secure channels to every military installation on Earth. Mars, Europa, and the hidden stations that existed only in classified files. It is happening, she said to Daniel, who stood beside her in the command center. They are sending a fleet. Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the main display showing the approaching armada. Then we wait, he said. We watch, we prepare, and we give them every chance to turn back. Because when the moment comes, and it will come, I want the entire galaxy to know that we gave them a choice. Lisa looked at him with something between admiration and concern. And if they choose wrong? Daniel turned to face her, and for just a moment, the diplomat's mask slipped, revealing the steel underneath. Then they will learn why Earth stayed silent for 43 years. 3 months had passed since the Council's vote, and the fleet of 200 warships now hung at the edge of Earth's solar system like a gathering storm, their massive hulls blocking out the distant stars as they waited for orders that everyone knew would come. Commander Nathan Cole stood at his station aboard Earth's orbital defense platform, his young face tight with tension as he monitored the enemy positions on his display. And beside him, veteran officers worked in careful silence, their fingers moving across controls with the precision of people who had trained for this moment their entire lives. They are holding position near Neptune, Nathan reported, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his stomach. 206 ships confirmed, with the Silurian flagship at the center of their formation. Admiral Monroe's voice came through the communication system, calm and measured as always. Understood, Commander, and keep watching. Because they will move soon, and when they do, I want to know about it before they finish giving the order on the Council flagship. Ambassador Ziranel of the Voltorian species stood before a viewing window and watched the distant blue dot that was Earth, her 4 eyes blinking in slow succession as she considered the situation they had created. She had argued against this mission from the beginning, not because she feared the humans, but because something about their silence troubled her in ways she could not explain. And now, as she watched the fleet prepare for what Vethrak called a diplomatic demonstration, she felt the trouble growing into genuine dread. You seem concerned, Ambassador, said a voice behind her, and she turned to find Counselor Vethrak approaching with his usual confident stride. I am always concerned when we point weapons at a species we do not understand, she replied, choosing her words with care. The humans have done nothing aggressive, and yet here we are, blockading their system as if they were enemies. Vethrak made a sound of dismissal, his scales rippling with amusement. They are not enemies. They are children who need to learn their place. And once we show them the power of the Council, they will see reason and join us as they should have done decades ago. And if they do not see reason, Ziranel asked it. Vethrak's eyes narrowed, and his amusement faded into something colder. Then we will teach them a harder lesson on Earth. Daniel Carter sat in a conference room with representatives from every major nation, their faces projected on screens around the table. And he explained the situation with the same calm he had maintained since the beginning. The Council has established a full blockade, he said. No ships can enter or leave our solar system. And our colonies on Mars and Europa are asking for guidance. What guidance can we give? Asked the president of the European Federation, her voice tight with frustration. We cannot fight 200 warships. And we cannot surrender our sovereignty to a council that treats us like primitive creatures. We will do neither, Daniel replied. We will wait, and we will watch, and we will let them make the next move. And if their next move is an attack? Asked the Prime Minister of Japan. Daniel looked around the room at the worried faces of humanity's leaders, and he thought of all the secrets they carried. All the preparations they had made over 4 decades of silent work. Then we will respond appropriately, he said. But not before. The weeks that followed were tense and quiet, with both sides watching each other across the vast distance of space. And Counselor Vethrak grew more impatient with each passing day. Finally, he could wait no longer, and he broadcast a message to Earth on every frequency, his voice filled with barely controlled anger. People of Earth, your stubbornness has tested the patience of the Galactic Council long enough, and I am giving you one final opportunity to send representatives to our flagship and formally accept our terms. And if you refuse, we will be forced to demonstrate the consequences of defiance. In Geneva, Daniel watched the message with Admiral Monroe at his side, and when it ended, he turned to face the communication array. What do you want to tell him? Lisa asked. Daniel considered the question for a long moment, thinking of all the things he could say, all the arguments he could make, all the pleas he could offer. And then he spoke a single sentence that would echo across the galaxy. We respectfully decline. Vethrak received the message in his command center, and for a moment he simply stared at the screen in disbelief, his scales darkening with rage. Respectfully decline? He repeated, his voice rising to a shout. They respectfully decline? He turned to his fleet commander, a battle-hardened Solarian named Rathkan, who had conquered 3 systems in his long career. Destroy their cargo station near Jupiter, the unmanned one we detected last week, and make sure they see it happen. Rathkan hesitated for just a moment. Counselor, destroying their property could be seen as an act of, it is a demonstration. Vethrak interrupted, a reminder of what we can do. And if they will not listen to words, then they will listen to fire. The attack was swift and brutal, with Council warships reducing the cargo station to scattered debris in less than 3 minutes and across the solar system. Every human installation watched in silence as the wreckage drifted through the darkness. Nathan Cole felt his hands shake as he watched the destruction, and he turned to his commanding officer with fury in his eyes. Are we just going to let them do this? He demanded. Are we just going to sit here while they destroy our property and threaten our people? We are going to follow orders, his commander replied, though her voice carried the same anger Nathan felt. And our orders are to wait on the Council flagship. Ambassador Ziranel watched the destruction with growing horror, and she approached Vethrak with urgency in her steps. This is a mistake, she said. We have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed, and the humans will not forget this. Vethrak turned to face her with contempt in his eyes. The humans will do nothing, because they can do nothing. And tomorrow we will advance to their homeworld and finish this foolish resistance once and for all. He gave the order that night, and the fleet began its journey toward Earth. 200 warships moving through the darkness with weapons armed and shields raised in Geneva. Admiral Monroe stood before her command staff and spoke the words they had waited decades to hear. They are coming, And it is time. Daniel Carter joined her, his face grave, but his eyes bright with something that might have been anticipation. "Remember," he said to the assembled officers, "we give them every chance to turn back, every opportunity to choose peace, because when this is over, I want the galaxy to know exactly who we are." Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the Council fleet moved closer, unaware that they were sailing toward a truth that would change the galaxy forever. The Council fleet arrived in Earth orbit on a cold morning in March, their massive warships casting shadows across continents as they positioned themselves above the blue and green world that had defied them for so long. And Counselor Vethrak stood on the bridge of his flagship with satisfaction spreading across his scale face. "At last," he said. "After all their arrogance, after all their refusals, the humans will finally understand what it means to stand against the Council." His sensor officer, a young Solarian named Veltha, studied her displays with growing confusion, her four hands moving rapidly across the controls as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. "Counselor, I am detecting unusual energy signatures across the planet's surface," she reported. "They do not match any known technology in our databases." Vethrak waved a dismissive claw. "Probably primitive power plants or mining operations. Focus on their defensive positions and tell me what we are facing." Velda worked her controls again, and her confusion deepened into something closer to concern. "That is the problem. Counselor, I cannot find any defensive positions, and their orbital stations appear to be unarmed, and their ships are scattered without any formation. Then they have no defenses," Vethrak concluded with a cold smile. "Which makes our task even simpler." Ambassador Ziranel stood at the back of the bridge, her four eyes watching the blue world below. And she felt the same unease she had carried since the beginning of this mission, growing stronger with every passing moment. Something was wrong. She was certain of it, because no species survived for this long by being as helpless as the humans. Appeared to Bevethrak opened a communication channel to Earth, his voice broadcasting across every frequency. "People of Earth, your council has come to deliver judgment, and you will lower your planetary shields immediately and allow our inspectors to land on your surface. And you will send your leaders to my flagship to formally surrender your independence, and if you refuse, we will take what we want by force." The response came not from a government building or a military installation, but from a simple office in Geneva, where Daniel Carter stood before a communication array with Admiral Monroe at his side. "Counselor Vethrak," Daniel said, his voice calm and measured, "I appreciate your directness, and I want to be equally direct with you. Earth will not lower its shields, and Earth will not surrender. And I strongly advise you to take your fleet and return to Council space before this situation becomes something that neither of us can control." Vethrak laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through both bridges. "You advise me?" he said with contempt. "You have no fleet, no weapons, no allies. What possible threat could you represent to 200 warships?" Daniel looked at Admiral Monroe, and she gave him a small nod. "Counselor," Daniel said, "I have spent 43 years hoping that this moment would never come. And I have sent you message after message asking for peace. And you have responded with blockades and destruction and threats. And now you hover above my world and demand surrender." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made even Vethrak hesitate. "You have made your choice. And now you will witness ours across the solar system." Hidden installations that had waited for decades suddenly came alive, and the galaxy witnessed something that would be remembered for 10,000 years on the surface of Mercury. Sections of rock slid away to reveal massive weapon platforms that turned their barrels toward the sky, and in the asteroid belt, chunks of stone that had drifted for centuries broke apart to expose warships that powered up their engines with silent fury. And on the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, hangars opened to release fighters by the thousands. Veltha's display erupted with warnings, her voice rising to a scream as she tried to process what she was seeing. "Counselor, we have contacts, hundreds of contacts, no, thousands. They are everywhere." Vethrak stared at the main display in disbelief as the darkness around them filled with human ships. Vessels that should not exist, weapons that should not be possible. A fleet that emerged from hiding like a predator, revealing itself to prey that had wandered too close. "That is impossible," he whispered. "Where did they come from?" Ambassador Ziranel moved to stand beside him, a voice barely above a whisper. "They were always there," she said. "They were always watching, always waiting. And we walked right into the middle of them." The human fleet numbered over 600 warships, supported by dozens of weapon platforms and thousands of smaller craft. And they formed a perfect sphere around the Council Armada, their weapons locked and their shields raised on Earth. Admiral Monroe opened a channel to her forces. "All units, hold position and await orders. Do not fire unless fired upon. And if they shoot first, make sure they regret it." Counselor Vethrak stood in the center of his bridge, surrounded by officers who looked at him with fear and confusion, and for the first time in his long career, he felt the cold grip of doubt closing around his heart. "How?" he demanded, turning to his intelligence officer. "How did we not know about this?" The officer had no answer, because there was no answer. The humans had hidden their true strength so completely that the entire galaxy had believed them to be primitives. And now the Council fleet was trapped in a cage of their own making. Daniel Carter's voice came through the communication system again. But this time, there was no warmth in it, no diplomacy, only the hard edge of a man who had run out of patience. "Counselor Vethrak, you came to our world with weapons and threats and demands, and you destroyed our property and blockaded our system and called us primitive, and we gave you every chance to turn back, every opportunity to choose peace." He paused, and across 200 council ships, every being listened in stunned silence. "You chose war instead, and now you will face the consequences of that choice. But I am going to give you one more chance, one final opportunity to order your fleet to stand down and withdraw. Because despite everything you have done, I do not want this to end in blood." Vethrak looked at the human ships surrounding his fleet, at the weapon platforms aimed at his hull, at the fighters that could destroy his engines before he could even give the order to retreat. And he realized with terrible clarity that he had made a mistake that could cost him everything. Ambassador Ziranel stepped forward, a voice urgent. "Accept his offer. Counselor, we cannot win this fight. And there is no shame in recognizing when we have been outmatched." But Vethrak's pride was stronger than his wisdom, and his fear turned to anger as he gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. "All ships, open fire, destroy them all." The darkness exploded into light as the battle began. The Council fleet fired first, 200 warships unleashing their weapons in a desperate fury that lit up the space around Earth like a dying star. And for one brief moment, Counselor Vethrak allowed himself to hope that sheer firepower might be enough to save them. That hope died within seconds. Captain Maria Santos stood on the bridge of the Resolute, Earth's flagship, her dark eyes tracking the enemy fire on her display with the calm focus of a woman who had prepared for this moment her entire career. "All units, engage defensive pattern Omega and return fire," she commanded. "Target their weapons and engines only. I want prisoners, not corpses." The human fleet moved with a precision that made the Council forces look like children playing with toys, their ships dancing through enemy fire while their weapons struck with surgical accuracy. And within 5 minutes, 30 Council vessels had lost their engines and drifted helplessly, and Spacevak watched his fleet crumble with growing horror. his claws digging into the arms of his command chair as ship after ship reported critical damage. How are they doing this? He demanded. Our weapons cannot penetrate their shields, and their weapons cut through ours like they are made of paper. His tactical officer was too busy trying to coordinate a retreat to answer. But Ambassador Ziranel spoke from her position near the back of the bridge. They had 43 years to prepare for this moment. Counselor, and they spent every one of those years developing technology that we cannot match. And now we are paying the price for our arrogance on the Resolute? Commander Nathan Cole had been transferred from his orbital station to serve as a tactical officer, and he worked his controls with fierce concentration as he directed fire against a cluster of enemy cruisers. Captain, the Silurian flagship is trying to break through our perimeter, he reported. Should I order our ships to intercept? Maria Santos studied the display for a moment, watching Vethrek's vessel attempt to punch through the human lines with the last of its escorts. Let him try, she said. And when he fails, disable his ship and prepare boarding teams. I want the Counselor alive. The battle raged for 40 minutes, though it felt like hours to those who fought it. And when the last Council weapon fell silent, the results spoke for themselves. 112 Council ships had been destroyed or disabled, with an additional 60 captured intact, and the remaining vessels had surrendered without further resistance. Human casualties numbered less than 200. A testament to the technological superiority that Earth had hidden for so long. Vethrek's flagship drifted powerless in space, its engines destroyed and its weapons melted into slag. And the Counselor himself stood in his ruined bridge surrounded by human soldiers who had boarded his vessel with professional efficiency. Counselor Vethrek, said the boarding team leader, a young woman named Lieutenant Sarah Walsh. You are being taken into custody by Earth Defense Forces, and you will be treated according to the laws of war. Please come with us. Vethrek said nothing as he was led through the corridors of his own ship, past crew members who watched with shame and fear, past damaged systems that sparked and smoked, past everything he had built his career upon. They brought him to the Resolute, where Captain Santos waited with Daniel Carter at her side, and the Counselor was escorted to a meeting room where 3 chairs sat around a simple table. Daniel gestured for Vethrek to sit, and the Counselor did so with the stiff movements of someone whose pride had been shattered beyond repair. I expected you to gloat, Vethrek said, his voice hollow. I expected speeches and demands and humiliation. Daniel shook his head slowly. I am not here to gloat, Counselor, and I am not here to humiliate you. I am here to explain, because you deserve to understand why this happened. He leaned forward, his eyes meeting Vethrek's with an intensity that made the Counselor look away. 43 years ago, when we first detected signals from the Galactic Council, we had a choice to make. We could rush to join you and spend centuries trying to catch up, or we could stay silent and develop on our own terms, and we chose silence. But why? Vethrek asked, genuine confusion breaking through his despair. Why hide your strength when you could have used it to gain power and influence? Daniel smiled, but there was sadness in it, because we have seen what happens to species that rise too fast. Counselor, we have our own history, filled with empires that conquered everything they could reach and then collapsed under the weight of their own ambition. And we did not want to become another cautionary tale. Captain Santos spoke for the first time, her voice steady. We stayed silent because we were waiting to see what kind of galaxy we would be joining, whether it was a place of cooperation or conquest, of wisdom or warfare. And what did you conclude? Vethrek asked. Daniel's expression hardened. We concluded that the galaxy was not ready for us, and we hoped that if we waited long enough, that might change. But you did not give us the chance to find out, because you came here with your fleet and your demands and your certainty that we were nothing but primitives to be bullied into submission. Vethrek sat in silence for a long moment, processing everything he had heard, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What happens now?" Daniel leaned back in his chair and exchanged a look with Captain Santos. "That depends on you. Counselor, you can return to the council and tell them the truth about what happened here, about who we really are and why we stayed silent. Or you can say nothing and let us deliver that message ourselves." "You would let me go?" Vethrak asked in disbelief. "We are not conquerors," Daniel replied. "We never wanted this war, and we do not want the one that might follow. But if the council cannot accept peace, then they will learn that Earth's silence was a gift, not a weakness." He stood and walked to the door, pausing to look back at the defeated counselor. "You have 1 week to decide, and I hope you choose wisely. Because the next time a council fleet enters our space without permission, we will not be so merciful." The door closed behind him, and Vethrak sat alone with the weight of his failure pressing down upon him like a physical force. 1 month after the battle, the Great Hall of the Galactic Council was filled with tension so thick it seemed to press against the walls, and representatives from all 12 species watched in stunned silence as Counselor Vethrak walked to the central platform with the slow steps of a broken man. His scales had lost their shine. His posture had lost its pride, and his eyes had lost the arrogance that had defined him for centuries. And when he spoke, his voice carried none of the fire that had once made lesser beings tremble. "I stand before you today, not as your leader, but as a warning," he began. "I led our fleet to Earth with certainty in my heart, certain that the humans were primitives, certain that they would bend to our will, certain that silence meant weakness." He paused, and the silence in the chamber was absolute. "I was wrong about everything." He activated a holographic display that showed the battle in brutal detail. Human ships moving with impossible grace as they dismantled the council fleet with surgical precision, and the representatives watched with growing horror as they realized the scale of the defeat. The humans did not stay silent because they were weak. Vethrak continued. They stayed silent because they were stronger than any of us imagined, stronger than any species in this council. And they hid their strength because they did not want to use it. The Voltorian representative rose from her seat, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "How is this possible?" she demanded. "How could one species develop such technology without any of our intelligence networks detecting it?" Vethrak turned to face her with something like respect in his eyes. "Because they were patient. Ambassador patient in ways that we cannot comprehend. And they spent 43 years building and preparing and waiting. And we gave them every reason to keep waiting by treating them exactly as they expected us to." Ambassador Zira now stepped forward from her position among the Voltorian delegation, her voice strong and clear. "I was there at the battle and in the aftermath, and I spoke with the human leaders, and I believe I understand what they want." The chamber turned its attention to her, and she felt the weight of history pressing down upon her shoulders. "They want peace," she said. "Real peace. Not the kind that comes from submission, but the kind that comes from mutual respect. They want to be left alone to develop on their own terms, and they want the council to understand that they are not our enemies unless we make them so." The Silurian who had taken Vethrak's place as council leader, an elder named Methro, leaned forward in his seat. "And what happens if we refuse to give them what they want?" Ziranel met his eyes without flinching. "Then we will face a war that we cannot win, against a species that has already shown it can destroy our greatest fleet with minimal losses. And I do not think any of us want that on Earth." Daniel Carter watched the council proceedings through long-range sensors, standing in the same office where he had spent so many years waiting for this moment, and Admiral Monroe stood beside him, with her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. "They are scared," Lisa observed. "You can see it in the way they move, the way they speak. They finally understand what we are." Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the display. Fear is not what I wanted them to feel, but it is better than the contempt. They showed us before. Do you think they will accept peace? Daniel was silent for a long moment, thinking of all the ways this could go wrong, all the futures where humanity was forced to fight, all the blood that might still be shed. Some will, he finally said. Ambassador Zironel has been working hard to build support for a formal diplomatic relationship. And there are others who see the wisdom in cooperation rather than conflict, and the ones who do not. Daniel turned to face her, and despite everything that had happened, there was still hope in his eyes. We will deal with them when we must. But I am choosing to believe that most beings in this galaxy would rather live in peace than die in war. It is a gamble, but it is the only gamble worth making. In the council chamber, a vote was called, and for the first time in history, the Galactic Council formally acknowledged Earth as an independent power with full rights and protections under Galactic Law Ambassador. Zironel was appointed as the first official liaison to Earth, and she traveled to the human homeworld with a small delegation of diplomats who were eager to learn about the species that had humbled the greatest fleet in the galaxy. Daniel Carter met her on the landing platform in Geneva, and they shook hands. Beneath a sky that had been threatened just weeks before, "Welcome to Earth." "Ambassador," he said, "I hope this is the beginning of something better than what came before." Zironel looked around at the world that had defied all expectations, at the mountains and the cities and the people who walked the streets without fear. And she felt something she had not expected to feel. She felt hope. "I believe it will be," she replied, "though I suspect the road ahead will not be easy." Daniel smiled, and for the first time in 43 years, it was a smile of genuine peace. Nothing worth doing ever is. That night, Admiral Monroe and Captain Santa stood on an observation deck above Earth, watching the stars that had once seemed so threatening. And they spoke of the future with the quiet voices of warriors who had seen too much. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Maria asked. "Showing them our strength like that?" Lisa considered the question carefully before answering. "I think we showed them who we are, and that was all we could do. We spent 43 years hiding, waiting, hoping that someday the galaxy would be ready for us. And when they forced our hand, we gave them the truth. And now?" Lisa turned to face her, and there was peace in her eyes that had been absent for as long as Maria had known her. "Now we wait again, but this time we wait as equals, not as primitives. To be bullied or conquered, we showed them that silence is not weakness, that patience is not surrender, and that humanity will not be pushed." She looked back at the stars, at the distant lights of the council worlds and the countless species who now knew what Earth truly was. "We gave them a choice," she said, "and what they do with that knowledge is up to them." Far below, on the surface of the world that had changed the galaxy forever, 8 billion humans went about their lives in peace, knowing that the silence they had kept for so long had finally spoken louder than any words ever could. Somewhere in the great hall of the Galactic Council, a new era was beginning, an era where humanity stood not as primitives or conquerors, but as something far more dangerous and far more wonderful. They stood as equals, and the galaxy would never be the same.